we see a civilization that's overstripping its own capacity to feed itself and basically dumbing itself to death.
So we are both the solution and the problem. We are in each other's way, but if we step out of the way, then all of a sudden certain things are possible and we can start the process of changing. Bullshit has actually been turned into reality.
It's our primary energy source.
We're going to develop a series of technologies that allow us to come into balance with the natural systems. We don't have to fear the future.
Essentially, we're asking the stupidest question of all. Why are we here? Welcome to Another World is Possible. This is not just a show. This is a portal into another world, into another reality that we're making possible together. Today's extremely special, rare, excellent, top-tier guest, one of my favorite people on planet Earth, Simon Michaux, is here to actually ideate and bring into formation the purple transition. So Simon is who is Simon? Simon, real quick, just bring us up to speed here.
Okay, g'day, Zach. Simon Michaux.
For those of us who haven't read the CIA dossiers, who is Simon Michaux?
Right. So I work for the Geological Survey of Finland. I've been working in industrial transformation of our society, phasing away fossil fuels, replacing what we've got now. I've been working in Europe. I'm from the Australian mining industry. My foundational training is a degree in physics and geology, PhD in mining engineering. I've been looking at the realities associated with transforming our world. Now, we do need to do it. And what I found is the plan as advertised and as handed to us by our leadership is fundamentally flawed. And I've been talking to people like yourself, Zach, for some years now around the idea that we need to come up with a new plan, a fundamentally new plan that will set off a chain reaction and then lead us to a different way of doing things. And the existing plan doesn't really help us.
All right. So on that subject, this is the purpose of our call today. We are going to take you through the MetaMyth, this archetypal ancient story system that has been the forgotten navigation system for humanity for all these years. We have let algorithms and dudes in suits govern us. And we've basically been stuck in a bad story that the things that are happening in the world today are happening because they have to, and because they're normal, and because that's just the way the world is. Stop questioning it. So the MetaMyth is essentially an archetypal structure that we're going to use to talk through the essential stages of the story that is going to make this transformation a reality. So we start this journey in this sort of high mountaintop. We're sort of looking over the earth from high up above in a satellite or on a high mountain swirling through smoke, and we see this sort of cosmic context of what's going on. We see the fires, we see the floods, we see the hurricanes, we see the massive stupidity of people trampling each other for big screen TVs on Black Friday, whatever. We see a civilization that's overstripping its own capacity to feed itself and basically dumbing itself to death. So Simon, well, let's start out in that sort of space of the problem. This is the call to adventure. This is the dragon that is terrorizing our village and pushing us into action. What is the dragon? What is the problem that we're here to solve?
I think it actually comes down to how we as a species see things. Like we just don't seem to the life we have built as a society and all the different cultures that are operating at the moment is based on a series of stories that we tell ourselves, a series of paradigms. And those paradigms were all swings and roundabouts a couple of centuries ago. Like in, we could get away with behaving like this and operating like this. But now there are some fundamental problems that we've actually got to work with. So we're getting to the point where the way we're actually doing things needs to transform, and we need to have a new set of stories. And this is at all levels. It's not just how we see the world and how we see each other and the environment, but it's also our technology. And all the technology is the rate determining step. Technology dictates what we have available to behave, to function as a society. It's like, how do we choose to do things? What are our true limitations? And so this is actually what I've been sort of working on, but that's like a layer. I see things as a system. Everything's connected to everything else. And at a fundamental level, we have a belief, for example, that natural resources are infinite. The planetary environment is there for us to make money out of. It doesn't matter if we treat other people appalling. There are no limits. Someone else will think of something. We don't have to. Our biggest priority is the next dopamine hit. We're moving into a world where I think we've got to, for want of a better word, spiritually grow up. We've got to mature. As a species, we're like a teenager that's about to move into adulthood, and a lot of our behaviours were all right for a short period of time, but they're not going to work anymore. And that's the position that we find ourselves in. And that's not only us socially, that's us industrially, it's technology, it's how we operate as a society, as in socially, but it's also stewardship of this planet environmentally. Right? It all has to change at once. And the reason it's such a fundamental change is the change starts within us. So we are both the solution and the problem. We are in each other's way, but if we step out of the way, then all of a sudden certain things are possible and we can start the process of changing.
So I mean, beautifully said. I mean, you really just nailed the essence of really what my personal quest is in this world is to change that story, to change that overarching structure and the sort of grammatical forms of that structure, and to really blow it away and to go back to your past life as a blasting expert in mining and blow away these obstacles and obstructions, because within the problem is the solution, not outside of it. And so yeah, why don't we talk a little bit more about the hard problems that we're specifically addressing that are actually physically shaping the structure of our solutions.
So when we the blasting metaphor, when mining engineers blast, it's a form of engineering. And they really do plan everything. Like when they do, for example, a demolition of a building, they spend months putting in appropriate explosives and timing and everything. And so when we take a complicated problem, we can't just set an atom bomb up underneath and hope for the best. It's a controlled demolition, which allows us to put something in its place. So the fundamental problems, well, there's a few of them. I started in energy. Now, that's not the only problem. Oh, I really started in raw materials, mining in particular. Now, that is not the only problem. It just happens to be where I started. So my professional work thus far, and remember this is a system. So you work on one little layer and it actually connects to everything else. So you started in another part of the layer, but actually we were on the same page doing the same things. Where we get our raw materials from has got to evolve. What energy source we use has to evolve. And the technology needed to extract that energy source and those raw materials needs to evolve. And at the moment, everything's based on fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, and uranium, which is not a fossil fuel, but it's energy. And internal combustion engines and blast furnaces are the old systems. The plan B that's been proposed is based on solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, which is a combination of electricity generation and transport. Okay, all of that technology works and has its place, but has problems in scale up, and it's not as effective as we would like. So all of that needs to evolve into something else, and I've been giving some thought about what that something else is. Because if we can get that right, to the point where we can generate electricity and energy heat in concentrated forms in any weather, but we have to do it in a small material footprint with a small infrastructure requirement, which means the human system can shrink in size, right? But then we've also got to adjust our priorities and what we use that energy for. For example, this here is my mobile phone, and in this mobile phone is the most exotic combination of minerals and metals, more so than this computer that we're talking through. We've got all the rare earth elements from gallium and terbium and scandium. It's all in these mobile phones. But do we need that complexity to function as a phone? No, we don't. That's what I'm saying, is we've got to seriously look at, instead of trying to make the coolest widget for a dopamine hit, what is it we really need to do? So we've got to develop and evolve internally. We've got to go inside ourselves and work out what it is we really need. What we want, what we need, and what we do have got to become the same thing. So what does that mean? And so our priorities and our lists of what we need and want as a society changes. And as that changes, the target to hit changes. So if we can reduce the complexity, for example, of our technology, like if we went back to just like an old-fashioned Nokia, that just like a Nokia phone that does a phone call and sends an SMS. That's all we need to do.
Or like what we were talking about with Dylan, which is a necklace like you have with a wearable with one chip that has a microphone and a speaker that is basically connected to a local LLM that's connecting to our local database of information that's happening around us, that's connecting with other systems, or going into distributed computing with holochain and things like this. I mean, there's just it underscores a question that our technology systems and our economic systems together as systems are incompatible with the world that we are completely dependent upon, that everything is connected to. And we have a fundamental need to evolve and to become more efficient in how we meet our basic needs, how we understand them, and the material systems and energy systems that allow us to meet those needs, which we have not been thinking about. We have been very wantonly, like a teenager driving a sports car, not even thinking about putting gas in it or oil. I actually wrecked a very nice car years and years ago as a young, crazy, manic buck because I didn't put oil in it. That's what we're doing as a species. And so, I mean, I want to add a sort of dimension to this, that a part of this problem is that the technical structures and systems of our world include our economic systems, our monetary systems, the needs of the economic system to grow and use more materials and use more energy simply to bring up numbers that are really disconnected from our actual needs. And I think this is sort of really underneath the problem within the problem, that the economic system and the political system that is supposed to be driving that ship are fundamentally decoupled and disconnected from the real carrying capacity of the earth, the needs of the people, and the will of any of us, the design sensibility of the masses and the amazing ideas and innovations and creative thinking out there in the world that has solutions to all of these problems, that has alternatives, that there are alternatives and substitutions and new structures and new experiments that we can run on all of these different problems, but we're not, because we're sort of stuck in the same economic, socio, and political paradigm.
So what I work on the idea of the human species, if it was modeled as a single person, right, we would be an obese teenager addicted to crack that's been told to kick the habit. That's kind of the position that we're in. And as an addict, we've got to come to terms with why we've got to do that. So my understanding of getting my arms around this, we are coming to the end of a cycle that's a couple of centuries long. What I like to, for example, in say medieval Western Europe, most of the time most of our time and energy, and indeed conflict at the time, was based around arguments over which religious code was better, Protestant or Catholic. Right, and how we actually managed resources was essentially the same, and our primary way of moving stuff around was sail maritime. Right, so then we actually had the manifestation of the Age of Reason kicked off. After the Reformation, the civil war within the church, that came to an end, and the Age of Reason, or the Age of Enlightenment, kicked off around the 16th century. And what we call science manifested for the first time en masse, merged with philosophy and changed the world. A few centuries later, that was one cycle. A few centuries later, what we call engineering manifested, merged with money, and changed the world. The Industrial Revolution kicked off. A few centuries later from that, so that's around 1800, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution was also the start of the neoclassical economic foundation. This is our mate Steve Keen's backyard, where classical economics is the value of something is based around the materials and physical effort it takes to make something. Whereas neoclassical was based around the idea, if I can convince someone it's worth 10 times what I had to do for it, and they give me money, therefore it is actually worth 10 times what I put into it. So
yes, the technical economic term for that is bullshit.
It's also marketing. It is horseshit. We do live in a world that's run on bullshit. Bullshit has actually been turned into reality.
It's our primary energy source.
We are well, that and students and hamster wheels. So, but that's now running aground. The idea that when we first, this is the idea of Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations, with the idea of the invisible hand, where terrible people doing terrible things, working to their own best interests with the invisible hand, will take actions which are largely for the benefit of society at large. That was horseshit, right? What that has now led to is corrupt criminals take control of our society at the government level, form an oligarchy, and then they stitch things up for their benefit. And then several centuries later, we're in the position we are at the moment, wondering what the hell happened to our life. How could things get this way? And there's many examples of that. It's also the idea that in the beginning of neoclassical is the natural world was just resources for us to make money out of. And neoclassical economics also couldn't tell the difference between a pollution side stream that the environment had to absorb, and human-made capital and natural capital. Couldn't tell the difference at all at a theory level. We're now to the point where our human system's now very large. Our consumption footprint is unprecedented. It's also very large and complicated. Our natural resources are all depleted in terms of quality and size. The natural world is deteriorating sharply because of how we've managed things in a stewardship context. We've operated in terms of isolated. Every action is isolated from everything else. It doesn't matter. Our actions don't matter. We don't care the implications of what we do. It's someone else's problem. And now we've got situations like the seas are now full of plastic pollution and they're acidifying fast. But it's international waters and everyone points at everyone else saying it wasn't me, you can't prove it. Right? But we keep going. And so what I'm saying, there's a long-winded way of saying we are now at a point where another change is happening. And ecological biophysics economics in some form is about to take hold. And what I would use to describe the world that's coming, right, how would you put it? Ecological reality will take hold, which will merge with situation awareness. True situation awareness will merge with the ability to tell what is real and what is not. Those two things will merge and the world will change. And from that point, as a species, we then will move out and say, okay, now we can develop some new things. Now we can develop a new way of doing things. So what we do need is technology to support that paradigm. Without that technology, we're back to banging rocks together and calling it engineering.
Quite a call to adventure. The scene is set. The stage, the lights are low. The conflict is ready. We are in the fucking third act right now of our human journey. And it's time to really find ourselves in that. And you posed a perfect question earlier in the perfect way. Why? Why are we here? What is our purpose in all this? Talking about systems, the highest leverage point in a system is the purpose. And basically you could change the energy inputs in the system, which is what they're trying to do. But it's not changing the system. You can shuffle politicians and political parties through it, but that's not necessarily going to change the system either, as we see. Basically, until we change the fundamental purpose of our systems away from this sort of delusion of destroying real wealth and ecological reality to turn into economic bullshit and political power, the system is not going to change. And so in the next sort of leg of our journey, the next mountain that we're here to cross is all about purpose. And it's really understanding what is our quest here? What is underneath the immediate task at hand that we could just say, all right, let's just jump in and start doing this? What is our overarching quest that is almost unsolvable, that is underneath everything? You posed this yesterday that was really, really great. You were like, my job is to ask the stupid question no one thinks to ask. So can you let's get into that. Let's talk about our quest. Let's talk about our purpose here with the purple transition.
So at an abstract level, what I was trying to do was actually put some reality as if we were actually to go out and do this, for example, the green transition, or keep the existing system going. Everyone around me was in an echo chamber saying the same things again and again and again. But if we were to actually do this in a practical sense, how would we do it? And won't we hit these bottlenecks? And then people would say, no one's ever asked that. Why would you do that to us? Shut your mouth, leave us alone. And then I says, well, and then they would say something to the effect of, you can't prove your ideas. No one's proved it. Therefore, it doesn't exist. It's not true. And in the school of thought that anger gets shit done, I just went out and collected the numbers on a very, very basic set of questions. And now I'm just one bloke with a cheap computer and an internet connection, and I was able to outmaneuver most of the world-class strategic development groups around the world because they hadn't asked the very basic questions. They were still enthralled with the idea of everything's a market action. And those market actions are based on fiat currencies where we can just print more money. Therefore, nothing actually has to be accounted for properly. And so I just asked the basic question. And so if we are to do this, and underneath all that is, what the hell do we think we're doing? What direction are we going in? You ask the big questions for, let's phase out fossil fuels. Why? Okay, well, they're problematic. Okay, great. And they're depleting. Okay, good. Okay, I can understand that. So let's bring in a new system. Okay, what's that new system? We call it the green transition. Fair enough. And in fact, when I first came across it, it sounded cool. Back in 2009, 2010, I go, all right, seems legit. And then when I says, well, hang on a sec. If we had to actually make all this stuff, where would we get the stuff from that, and where would we put it all? Who would operate it? And I think, basic questions like that. And if we were successful, when you're actually sort of going for research grants, you've got to develop them in a context of what happens if you're successful. If you make a proposal, and you're proposing to a funding mechanism, what happens if they say, tap you on the shoulders, we're going to give you the money now, because now you've got to deliver. You've now got to deliver what you've just promised. And I go, really? Right, okay, so what you promise has got to match reality. What you promise, what you do. What you want, what you promise. It's all got to be the same rough direction and window, with the understanding that things change. And so the basic idea, like, where are we going? What are we doing? What's the purpose of our system? Like at the moment, I used to work for a private company in Australia. I won't say who it is, but their primary goal was growth. Their secondary goal was making money. That was it. And it's that's a goddamn cancer cell. It says, what's its purpose? So what's the purpose of the system? Oh, making money. Is it? So we are now in a society and a technology that we are now getting to the point where human beings are becoming obsolete. With AI and automation, the vast majority of jobs now are not necessary. Right now, you can say, does that mean we all become poet artists and we all sit around and work's done for us? No, the economic system that we've developed basically means most people are not necessary, and you have vast amounts of poverty. Ooh, in movies like Elysium or Blade Runner, the world you've seen in the background. That's the world we're creating. And so, in terms of, well, the question of what is AI and how do we use AI, and what is, machine learning and all this stuff, if it becomes, in terms of progression, like survival of the fittest, we are making ourselves obsolete. And so, human society has to decide: are we, do we control the technosphere, and does the technosphere serve us, or do we serve the technosphere? Like, how many people are addicted to their mobile phones at the moment? They can't live without it. How many systems are actually dependent on the internet? And so, yeah, you had your hand up.
Well, I was just going to say that yeah, this really gets at the heart of everything. What is the
Yeah,
purpose of a human being in the 21st century?
right,
And I
right.
think that's
What's our
that's a big
society?
part of why we're here.
What
What'd you say?
what the hell are we doing? Yeah, why are we on this planet? And what distinguishes
I
us
mean, it's
from
asking the
other
stupidest
species?
question of all. Why are we here?
Yeah. Why did you get out of bed? Ah. But the things like what motivates you to do things. And,
Basically, if you don't have a deep purpose beyond just making things
hmm,
out of infinite stuff to make money, you're not going to continue to exist in the new world.
right.
Like that's a fundamental truth. Essentially, we're asking the stupidest question of all. Why are we here? What is our purpose? And how do we fit into a larger ecology, and what is economy? And I think that's essentially the purpose of what the purple transition is getting at, is why are we here? What is the purpose of a human being? What is the purpose of our technology and the systems that we're creating? It's to investigate that.
the purple transition's technology based, right? But underneath that, I've also been doing a lot of reading and research into philosophy, and asking basic questions like, what is the technology for? What's the economy for? You if the wealth engine is consuming the natural environment to the point where it's becoming unstable, and all living systems are now in decline, right? If that's got to evolve into something else, what would that be? What's its purpose? So, what's society's purpose then? What's the social contract? What form do we live in? That comes down to how do we manage our resources? Where do we grow our food? And how do we grow our food is connected to how do we interact with the planetary environment, with the idea that we've got to keep it stable. Years ago, I used to talk to a couple of Aborigine guys in Australia, and the Aborigine culture had all this sorted out. So much so they never came out of the Stone Age because they didn't have to. And they were in perfect harmony with the natural environment for thousands of years. Yeah, anyway, so I've been giving some thought about the different economic systems too. And how does technology fit in all that? Like, if I develop the biggest widget in the world, one of my colleagues in New Zealand, first name Mike, hello Mike, he said when he actually saw that I'd actually sort of found some energy systems that were unorthodox but might work. He said, this terrifies me because humanity will now pick up where it left off and it will not learn what it needs to learn outside of all those energy and technology systems at a social context. And he was talking about the environmental relationship to the world. So there's some. We are at a point of change, and at a structural level, we can actually ask basic questions about what are we doing, where are we going, how do we get there, and once we get there, if we are successful, is it a place where we actually want to hand off to our grandchildren? And that last question, what kind of world do we hand off to our grandchildren? And these are big questions. And our existing society is geared to what was envisioned several centuries ago, like the more evolved version of that. So what we are now talking about is developing something so fundamentally new, something so different that we're going to set off a chain reaction that starts small, but over time it will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if it proves to work, it can be taken on by larger numbers of people. And we develop a system that runs in parallel to the one we have now. So at its intrinsic architecture, it can change what we are now.
That's a perfect segue into the next leg of our metamythic journey. What is possible? Where we really step off into what is the future we're trying to create? What is the outcome that we really believe in? What do we know is possible, unfettered by all the problems and obstacles and scarcities that we see before us? Where are we going? What is the world that we're trying to create? And how do we, even briefly, step out of the sort of the scruples and the structures and the compression of our immediate mile and all the problems and all the impossibilities to really just ask, what is possible? What is that world? What is this high, powerful, transcendent, sort of future technological synthesis of the philosophies and lessons that we've learned throughout the millennia that allows us to use this new technology to fundamentally restructure how we operate in this world, what we do, and who we are. Let's go. Let's go there.
Right. So while I was actually sort of doing my work where I was doing a tour of duty through all energy systems, this is the 2021 report. I actually took the work for the previous 20 years and said, look, put it all together and said, what can we look at? The report was written on all the conventional stuff. I had a whole lot of unorthodox stuff as well. There's about 40 or 50 ideas that were unorthodox, and while they were in the literature, there were papers to say, look, they were peer reviewed, so these are papers, it's real, and everything. But because it was unorthodox and it wasn't sort of accepted, that they were edited out. And what I found, it's not so much that we need new ideas. What we need is permission to look at unorthodox ideas that we've already known might teach us something. Whether they work or not, it's one thing, but they can certainly teach us something. But we are not allowed to look at these unorthodox ideas for some ideological reason. Right, and so what I'm finding is there are plenty of ideas around us that are actually quite mature. Some of them are decades old. That concepts that if we were to apply modern engineering and science capability to, we could make something of. And the reason we don't do it is the stories we tell ourselves. So we need to step past all that, and we need to go in on it. The major sectors are, in what I believe, are structural layers. First is, what is our energy system? And in that question is, what natural energy source does that energy system use? And what's the technology needed? And how complex is that technology? And what raw materials are needed to make that technology work? Next layer, where do we get our raw materials from for our society to be constructed and then operated? Right, and so these are the day-to-day raw materials, but also the technology to use that material, those raw materials. That combination will create a layer of technology that will allow us to organize ourselves socially. That will dictate terms in what is possible socially. If we are limited to, say, an 1880s level technology, like, say, the gold rush in California, 1850, right? Well, that will dictate a social contract because that will tell us, like, that will limit us what we can and can't do. On the other hand, if we had other technologies that were actually more capable, we've been able to do things. For example, our young, as a society, don't join society straight away. They spend something like 20 years getting educated before they join the workforce in a productive capacity. That's unprecedented. And that's actually a function of energy and technology that allows us to do that. If we go back to, say, a feudalist way of life, our children will have to join us in the fields mostly growing food at the age of 4 or 5. Right, and we won't have time for education the way we used to. Right, so this is the link between technology and social society. Then there's the raw materials that we actually get to do all this stuff. That's embedded in the natural environment. What is that natural environment? What's our relationship to it? Are we part of that natural environment, or is it something for us to make money from? And then that comes down to, money is the decision-making system of who does what and who owns what. So then there's the concept of what actually is money. And should we actually break these things up? Should we actually say, well, money is useful for some things, but we now do other things with other systems? And now that we're in the information age, we've got many sophisticated tools that we can actually operate with. But as a society, we've got to mature to the point where we can use those technologies to the point where we can change what we do and how we do it. Right, so these are the layers. Now, in every single one of those layers, we know there are things that we can start to work on. None of this is a mystery. For example, we know that petrochemical fertilizers in agriculture are causing a problem pollution-wise at a planetary scale. The phosphorus cycle and the nitrogen cycle on the planetary scales are being overloaded. That is coming to nutrient runoffs into our waterways from our industrial agricultural systems all around the world. Can we do anything else? Yes, regenerative agriculture and permaculture can be used to grow our food. But that does mean our society has to change. More people have to be involved with growing our food. So instead of like 1 in 10,000 people are farmers, it's going to be something like 1 in 9, 1 in 8 people might be involved in growing our food. Right, but our society has to be set up for that. It has to be designed for that. And we have to recover the commons. We've got things like at the moment we've got weird situations like growing food. This is Vandana Shiva's work. The ability for actually to grow crops of wheat and actually collect the seeds and replant them. Well, they've been genetically modified now, and through predatory tactics, the companies that actually own and produce those GMO products are now driving farmers who don't use their products out of business to the point where they're committing suicide. It is actually quite a serious problem, right? And so we've got to get to the point where we can grow our own food. This talks to the idea of what are our fundamental human rights, and one of them is the ability to grow our own food, access to fresh water, property ownership. These are all the things that have been used to disenfranchise societies in the past. We've got to have a very frank discussion about all that, and then we've got to be smart about how do we test these things and develop things in parallel. What have we learned? We've been punched in the face a few times now. What have we learned?
So I want to really sort of take a zoom out and really like go into the future, and this is sort of an intellectual and imaginative exercise to really unfetter ourselves from what is practical, what is achievable, what is attainable, and all the problems that we're struggling with, so that we can get to the outcome that we want, the world we want, the thing that really motivates us, the aspirations that are underneath all these hard problems, and step into that world of the future where we actually succeed, where we do this, where we carry it out, and then we want to work backwards from there to create a set of horizons that are milestones that we're going to be reaching for until we get back to ultimately where we take one foot on the ground and move toward that direction. But let's just start by really taking a big exhale and blasting out all the traffic and all the frustration and stress and stupidity at our jobs and work, and all of the insurmountable seeming odds of such a stupid system, and that is so far from what we really want, that it's even polluting our own imagination and our ability to explore that world. So we're really stepping into truly what is possible. What is possible if the purple transition is a rousing, incredible, monumental, global, transformative, revolutionary success? What's the world that we're living in? What's it look like? How's it function?
Okay, so for me, it's what are our energy systems? So I looked at several energy systems. There are no hard, fast rules. There's no one technology that solves everything. There's lots of things to use. There is a couple of technologies I liked. Now, first of all, there's energy, but then there's our transport. A new kind of transport needs to be developed. I'm put forward an unconventional form of transport. More of that in a moment. Back to energy. I like thorium molten salt reactors because they're small. The fuel cycle, being liquid fuel, is very, very different to the conventional solid fuel systems. They're very, very small. They're much simpler. They have a level of complexity compared to a isotope lab in a hospital. So, and the systems I've personally seen that are being produced for commercial action in 2028 are the size of a shipping container. And they arrive on a truck with 50 years of fuel in them, and they have a 5-year maintenance cycle. The electricity that comes out of them is much cheaper, than our conventional systems are at the moment. Right, so there's that. That's the way we deliver electricity and heat in all systems. When we manufacture, we need high-end heat of up to 2,000 degrees centigrade to things like smelting. And there's this whole series of industrial actions. I've proposed the replacement of coal, which is used for, smelting and metallurgical steel and what have you, to use a metal fuel instead. And what I've proposed is very fine iron powder, the equivalent of, say, powder from the powder coating industry. So it's a mature product. We know what it is. We know how to produce it. When you burn iron powder, it produces a lot of heat. It's an exothermic chemical reaction around 1,960 degrees Celsius in a practical sense. That can replace coal. Now, what's interesting, when you burn iron powder, it's not destroyed, it's oxidized. So pure iron powder becomes iron oxide, which is rust. We can actually strip the oxygen out of that in a hydrogen atmosphere or a syngas atmosphere and recycle the fuel. So iron powder can be used as a fuel, but then it can be recycled. You don't need more iron powder. We can do that in either a hydrogen atmosphere or a syngas atmosphere. Now, syngas is a combination of hydrogen and carbon monoxide and a few other hydrocarbons. We can get syngas by taking human sewage and heating it in a system called pyrolysis, which is heating without oxygen. If we use a thorium reactor which can deliver the heat to do that, that human sewage breaks down into a gas called syngas and biochar and a bioliquid. The biochar and bioliquid could be used for fertilizer production. The gas can be used to recycle the oxidized metal powder. So now we have a human waste product which has caused a lot of problems health-wise, and there's a lot of infrastructure required to manage it in a conventional sense. And in a localized, decentralized fashion, can be processed in a way where it can recycle a metal fuel associated with industrialization. There is a link between a human settlement waste product and recycling an industrial fuel. That changes the calculus on how a society comes together. It is now possible, for example, with those two combinations, to take a society that is international and global, a just-in-time supply grid that's complex across 6 continents, it's very, very complex, and break it down into a decentralized, more localized system. Our entire energy system can be managed on a regional scale. So instead of having one power plant in, say, one area and then project power for hundreds of kilometers, miles in every direction, you can have lots and lots of small systems where there's one in each town. There's one under every industrial system. And they're all managed. The waste that comes out of these things is orders of magnitude smaller than the waste that comes out of a normal solid fuel uranium system. Like the nation of Finland would need 1 truckload of fuel to generate all the electricity it would need for 1 year. And the waste that would come out of that is 120 kilograms. And you store that waste for 300 years, not 10,000. So this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity that we are looking at. We are going to go from a massive centralized system to a decentralized system. And as our energy can be decentralized and our manufacture can be decentralized, if we start doing things like additive manufacturing, take 3D printing. It's energy intensive, but if you're backed by a thorium reactor, that's not a problem. Right? That changes the rules. So at a small scale, so instead of saying economies of scale, let's make money, and so, well, money is changing nature anyway, and it's changing form anyway, let's now make stuff of what is needed. And what is needed? Well, that comes down to our economic model and our societal model. And so we can have a decentralized form. Right, so it's a decentralized system that is simpler than the one we have now. But we still maintain things that are important to us. And I think the metric we should all chase and try and maintain is the ability for our young people to be educated for 20 years before they join the workforce. How do we maintain that? What our societies will look like? Well, there's where do we get our energy from? That's one question. How do we transport stuff? Because at the moment, let's take the city of Los Angeles. You need a car to get around Los Angeles. The whole technology associated with car and the value chain behind a car is needed to do anything. Whether you're transporting stuff or getting access to stuff that you buy, it all comes in by truck. And the car was based around the idea of the horse and cart. It was just a horse and cart without a horse. And so we had the idea of streets and things that move around, and it just, the technology became so effective, we took that basic pattern and we replicated it further. So if we go up to like a zoom out and then zoom back in, what are we trying to do? We want to move materials and goods around a settlement like a city. Let's say a small city. I like the size of about 10,000 people. So like a town, like a largish town. And so we've got to move stuff around that city. We've got to move people, but we've also got to move freight. If we could actually change how we do that and rearrange our city accordingly, if we've got access to energy, and if we build infrastructure where we have the equivalent of, say, a tram line or I propose the idea of a combination of a monorail to move people, but underneath that is an underslung system that can move shipping containers on like a frame. And it's like a conveyor belt frame. And so you have a transport system that moves freight and people in a way where they don't interact at all. I call this the spine rail arterial system. And if we build the infrastructure for that, for not all roads, but one important ring that goes around the whole city. And there's other roads, and we will have some cars, but not all. Yeah.
Simon, can I make a request?
Sure.
So, we've talked about a lot of this stuff in great depth in multi-hour long podcasts. You know, you've been assembling and compiling massive documents and roadmaps to all of the technical specifications here. What I really want to get into here for listeners and for our own storytelling and understanding how to tell this story in the most compact and effective way.
Right, gotcha. Okay.
In this visionary section, I really want to zoom out into giving people sort of the 1,000-yard view of essentially, if I can sort of put on my storytelling Akubra hat and describe this myself, that it's a decentralized civilization that is sovereign in its resource, energy, and agricultural production, that is deeply biophysically rooted in the planetary environment, and that creates more networked distributed information systems and governance systems to reflect this. Ultimately, we're working to bring ourselves out of the outdated sort of neoclassical economic paradigm and the centralized applications of that, the ways that the centralization of power and money have sort of manifested technologically in very heavy, brittle, non-resilient energy systems, material systems, and in the ways that we're basically endlessly producing and consuming, not for need, but for greed. And so this is a system, this is a transformation that is truly a revolution beyond just switching out one party for another. And this is, I think, key to the purple element of this. Yep. It's really fusing us into a new paradigm that brings together all of these different camps and ideas and perspectives into a fundamentally pluralistic society that is open and inquisitive, that is foundationally based on asking difficult questions and producing answers to them, and evolving continually using all of the best practices around the world to implement them into a new civilizational matrix, a new structure, a new formation of society that is just simply built different. Can we sort of have that 1,000-yard perspective? I really want to hear elevator pitch for the future.
So that's actually a much better way of saying it. So the previous 10 minutes was all the details, and perhaps even consider editing that out. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
this,
So
I just want to say this is a part of the process, and I think it's actually a key to how we shift our thinking. That instead of a sort of shame-based orientation of thinking, "Oh, I made a mistake, therefore I'm going to double down on it," or we're just going to chop it all out. It's like we're learning, we're growing, we're learning how to tell this story, and
yeah.
we're learning how to embody it and to really live in it. And yeah, this is a leap. All of this is a big leap. So yeah, go ahead.
So what I would then say is we're going to develop a series of technologies that allow us to come into balance with the natural systems, right? Which means, yes, it's decentralized. Yes, we are thinking in terms of management systems that are sovereign on a more regional scale, right? But we can also we can simplify the complexity of our existing systems where we actually step away from the need for materialism and consumption of resources for entertainment. And we go back to need, and we value things in the community spectrum. It's more social. We talk to each other again. We work together. We pull together as a society. I liked, for example, the concept of sacred masculine interacts with sacred feminine, and that's the foundation of our society in some form. As in, the family unit becomes the heart of our society once more, and trust and respect are the foundations of our social contract, a lot of which is missing at the moment. So we've got to evolve to the point where we understand why we've lost that and how do we recover it. I would say we've got to change our technology, which at the moment is very consumption based, where we consume natural resources without thought, and then we create a lot of waste without thought, in terms of that doesn't matter. So we've got to change our paradigm around that. So it's a different kind of technology. We change our food production around that, and so this is comes back to how do we see ourselves, and the kind of society. The way I sort of envision it is just how would, say, a 10-year-old describe the society around them to someone else, and that is what I'm trying to pitch there. As in, society has different priorities. For example, if you go back, say, 600 or 700 years, everyone was in a village or a town where we're thinking in terms of we are now going to raid our neighbours for their resources, and if we don't prepare for that, they're going to raid us. And then we thought that was normal. That state of affairs was normal. That was the paradigm at the time. And the paradigm for the last couple of 100 years, we will make money. We will consume stuff and make money for the sake of making money, because we can. Right? So now we've got to find a new fundamental reason to live that motivates us as a society. But what allows us to do that is our
All right.
technology and energy and raw materials.
Okay, so I'm gonna push on this one because this is a show that's really about not about easy answers. It's really about emergence. It's about becoming. Story is the art of becoming. It's not just having something that distilled down to XYZ that you can regurgitate in a 30-second, a 90-second, and a hour-long clip. It's really how we are evolving ourselves, and so evolving how we tell stories. I think for a lot of people like us, Simon, we think in complexity. We think in issues and systems and structures that are just hard for people to grasp. And so I really want to push in on this point here of that. This is, I think, I'm certain, maybe because I know you very well, because we're working on this together, this is kind of a sticking point for a lot of people, that it becomes kind of too complicated. And I think people need they need the vision without being pulled into all of the little details and all of the need for the philosophy. They need an overarching sort of horizon to reach for. And they need to be able to see that in a sort of 1,000-yard view. In a way, like the Venus Project is a good touchstone for something like that, where it's a vision that people can kind of grasp. They sort of understand, okay, a world where we've transcended the monetary system through technology and through new technological systems, new ways of governing ourselves, new ways of engaging with the planetary environment, and it becomes a visual that people can sort of see and envision. I'm really curious to see how we can sort of dial into that for the purple transition so that you could explain this to somebody and paint them this beautiful picture and they just get it. It just clicks.
Right. So I liked the Venus Project. I liked Jacques Fresco's ideas. He was definitely ahead of his time. And I've taken those ideas and I've developed them further. I see the need for us to evolve on multiple fronts at once. I think we need to step away from seeing us as separate from the natural environment, and our purpose is to make money, but not necessarily for us. We make money for someone else. We've got to step away from that, and we've got to everything we do has got to be systems thinking based. Every decision we make, every action we take, has got to be understood that it connects with other things and it sets off a chain reaction. We've got to understand that chain reaction. Now, what I mean, for example, is when I buy a product from the local shop, where did that product come from? What were the materials that went into that? Why do I need that product in the first place? What's really going on there? And when I'm finished, I'm going to throw the spent product away when it's at the end of its useful life. What happens to that product? Now, the way we live at the moment, we don't care where stuff comes from, and when we throw it away, we don't give a second thought about whether it goes into landfill or not. And even when we talk about recycling, at the moment, we talk about it conceptually. We are not talking about practical mass flows. So what we're saying is we've got to evolve as a species, socially, as a group, but also individually. Individually, we've got to become more self-aware, more situation-aware, and we've got to lift our game in terms of how much of our life do we actually take responsibility for. So what would the purple transition be? And so it's a fundamental systems change where we look at everything around us and we say, well, what have we learned and what's the alternative? Going back to Jacques Fresco, he had the idea that if you had the best science had to offer and you tried to make a society that was optimized to the quality of life of the people in that society, what would it look like? And I think a version of that where human society, technology, and the natural environment could operate in harmony and in balance long term. That's the arena we would like to pitch to.
All right, so that is a great transition step to bring us into the mission. And we think about the mission as not this overarching thing that is like our reason to exist. Like so many nonprofits and organizations have a mission to sort of like fight hunger or some platitude that ends up becoming sort of self-perpetuating, where there's not really an impulse for them to actually end the problem. They want to keep it going. And so the mission is really a fractal of the whole storytelling structure that we're working toward, that it's a story within the story. It's the first step in that journey. And actually to recap, because I know this project very well, the horizons of the purple transition that we're trying to get to that form the missions that we're getting to, the furthest most mission is Promethea Nexus, is a city, is an application bringing together all of these different technologies, governance systems, agricultural techniques, permaculture, all of the best practices brought together into an instantiation in a 10,000 person city that applies all of this technology and all of this amazing possibility into something that's actually a functioning example to show the world a different kind of economic and technical and social system. Working back from there, the next step between that, oh wait, am I right? Yeah, the next step between that is really connecting with all of these different technologies and deciding which ones to scale up, which ones are important, which ones are actually viable and transformative, and doing the research into these, bringing energy and resources and materials and talent into scaling out these unorthodox ideas that are not unorthodox. They're absolutely essential for the transition and the survival of our species. And then working back into the here and now, into the mission, into the practice that is the purple transition, bringing together those people who are willing to ask those difficult questions, who are curious and excited and can't stop asking the question that nobody wants to talk about. How do we bring together into a movement all of those people in the world that we find that see this vision, that believe in this world that we're trying to get to, that understand its necessity and its ultimate pragmatism to create a movement, a media system, a political movement, and a sort of think tank and organizational mechanism to bring those people together into actualizing this transition and realizing it. So without heavy-handed piece, Simon, can you tell us about that mission? What's the mission? What's the next step? What are we trying to create as the purple transition? What is the purple transition?
Right. So the purple transition is a series of technologies that could form a network system that could form the basis of the next era of industrialization. Promethean Nexus is a gateway between this world and the next one. It's a stepping stone where we get together. Let me back up for a minute. Where this idea came from was when I asked the basic question. This is back to the silly question. What do we need? Why are we stopped? Why are we stuck? And I came to the conclusion was it's not that we needed new ideas. We needed permission to look at controversial ideas. Because a lot of our society at the moment will stop ideas from being discussed out loud because of some kind of ideology that finds it controversial. Then, when you talk to industrialists and people who actually fund these big projects and industrial projects, they says, I'm not going to touch an idea, I'm not going to come anywhere near an idea until it's been demonstrated. And all these unorthodox ideas through a series of gatekeeping actions, which academia, I can say from personal experience, does this. Ideas that don't fit the existing paradigm, established paradigm of thought, are not allowed to happen. An example of this, for example, is looking at battery chemistries other than lithium-ion at the moment. It's starting to be discussed now, but years ago it was very difficult to get any discussion going. So what I basically came up with the idea is what we need is a place that can look at the crazy ideas and then demonstrate some of them. So we needed a combination of a research facility and an engineering facility that would build at pilot scale some of these ideas. And then I thought, okay, well, if I was to do that, so we're talking about like a research lab of some description. If I was to set up shop, say, in Helsinki or London or Brisbane, a city in the existing Western world, what I've found is when you actually propose something radical and unusual, 300 or 400 people will stand up and actually take the time to try and stop you because you are different. Because you are proposing something that actually threatens existing schools of thought. So then it says, all right, well, I need to actually leave the Western world. Or I need to go somewhere where I can actually do stuff without, with less interference. So then I says, right, we need to go to a site that's a greenfield site, because a lot of what we want to actually try and build is so unusual that it's difficult to try and build it in an existing system. But if we go to a site where there's nothing, you've got to build everything from scratch. What you build now all of a sudden becomes very easy. So then so now we need a city, a human settlement, somewhere where there is no settlement now. We've got to start from scratch. We will build, starting very small, a series of industrial facilities that demonstrate the purple transition technologies. And we will then develop a research laboratory that looks at unorthodox ideas and develop some of those ideas into lab scale and pilot scale examples of those ideas and publish the outcome. And so what then evolves into, well, over time, it will evolve into a small city of 10,000 people with a world-class research facility of an unorthodox nature at its very heart. Okay, so then we said, well, how do we develop this idea? And this was Promethean Nexus. So Promethean Nexus will develop the tools that'll demonstrate to the rest of the world that certain things are possible. For example, thorium nuclear power, fourth generation molten salt reactors. At the moment, the Chinese are actually have one unit operating commercially since 2022 in the Gobi Desert, where while the West has been telling ourselves this is not possible, the Chinese have gone out and done it. They've shown it works, and they're now actually preparing to make several hundred such systems between now and 2037. Right, so they're doing it. They're doing it. Everyone I've spoken to so far in the West goes, sounds great, but show me an example where the metrics can be shown. Right, Promethean Nexus will demonstrate this stuff. We will have a unit that is operational, and we will use that power, and we will publish the results. Then everyone can say, right, it does work. So this is Promethean Nexus. We will innovate and we will demonstrate. The purple transition is assemblage of a series of concepts and technologies that could become the foundation for the next industrial era. Promethean Nexus will take some of those technologies and demonstrate them in a way where they're accessible for anyone who wants to use them and develop them for themselves. The gateway is opened, and so for those who choose to do so can move through that gate. And so the concepts that we are talking about in this podcast can then be made real.
So this is the beginning of that journey, and
Yes.
hang on. So this is the beginning of that journey, and the first step is to put out the call and to bring people out to this clarion call, this mission that we need to assemble the brightest minds in the world, the people who have answers and solutions, and the people who are willing to ask those bastard questions to advance this, and to really make a wave to push back in a way against both the sort of current green transition that is at its core a top-down, disconnected sort of plan put forth from people who don't really know what's going on the bottom level, and which is monstrously unpopular. And this sort of brings us into the political nature of the purple transition. I know that the name came from it basically just being your wife's favorite color. But it also fits in a deeper political sense because polarization is at an all-time high. You know, the sort of magnetic electrical polarity that is zapping us all into utter stupidity is the sort of duality and the binaries of a two-party system and of red versus blue, and this sort of oscillation between these two that neither really represents the people. The green doesn't represent the people because it's top down and it's put on by all these think tanks and people like the World Economic Forum. You know, red doesn't really represent the people because it's this sort of oligarchic, sort of hyper-capitalist, you know, fascist system. And blue is pretty much the same hyper-capitalist fascist system that is, you know, painted over with some, you know, identity politics and issues that are meant to sort of distract and divide. Ultimately, we need to chart a path between and to really transcend ideology as something that is disconnected from reality. Ideology is decoupled from the physical reality of our needs and from the practical realities of the world. And so we're creating a radically pragmatic middle path to attract people into a new kind of paradigm, a new kind of political shift, a new kind of philosophical discussion, a new way of discussing things that are controversial, in a way that doesn't shame ideas that don't fit into the box to try to fit them into these narrow dualities.
Right. So what we've got here is a steps and stage of the process. No one person has all the answers. So the idea is create an innovation hub where we can actually get people to interact with us, and we go out and search out such people, and then we talk to them to bring ideas in together, and we put them in one place. I like the idea of the portal, where if you have an idea that is that might be able to help us in some form, you submit that idea into the portal, but it becomes accessible to everyone. And so you have very quickly a world-class library of innovative ideas in a searchable form where people can exchange ideas. And so this is great. And so the idea is to collect all these different ideas from as many different directions as possible from lots and lots of different people who don't necessarily have to agree with each other. And that's the key point. We don't have to agree to work together because ultimately we want the same thing, ultimately. And so if we can engender an environment of respect where I'm okay with someone disagreeing with me as long as I respect them and they respect me, and our ideas can coexist at the same time, and we'll see how those ideas run. right? If we can do that without actually sort of these endless bloody flame wars that you often see on the internet, that are really sort of quite childish. If we can step past that, right? So now that, let's say, we've collected, say, tens of thousands of different ideas, some of them just hang in space by themselves. We've got to work out how to connect them together. We then we then get together, say, a group of, I don't know, is it 30, 40 people, and we come together in a conference, maybe several conferences over time, and we sort of say, how do we fit these ideas together? Well, we select some of them and we turn them into, and we want to actually get to the point where we're actually now going to build a physical settlement. So we're going to, how do we fit some of these ideas together? And then you say, well, we'll have more than one settlement then. One settlement does this and the other settlement does that. Okay. So you get these ideas and you fit them together to the point where they've come from many, many different directions, but they're now getting to the point where they can be engineered. And now we actually go into the engineering chute, where we go from a scoping study of a series of concepts to all the way through to feasibility to actual construction. We're actually going to build a physical site. So we're going to take a shotgun blast of ideas, and then we're going to connect them together into something practical, with the ideas that each site is different and each objective is different. And then we start another project, another city, another settlement with a different set of ideas. It manifests on the ground. We start doing physical things. Those physical things will then sort of, we'll start demonstrating things that some of these ideas can be prototypes. So it goes through the prototyping process. And with the idea that you might say try 50 to 60 ideas for every 2 or 3 that work. And that's okay, because that's actually sort of how we learn things. And then we publish the results. So then we've got a relationship between the people who have helped us and the people who actually do the work. It's also got to be funded. So there's several series of funding strategies that come with that. And how many people do you know have ideas but don't know what to do with them? They just don't have anywhere to go. If we can provide a place where those ideas can be go and interact with other ideas, and they can cross-fertilize, and eventually some of them actually manifest into physical reality. So you have a series of societies. It starts out with an internet community. It then goes to a series of meets of people who physically meet, to one or more physical human settlements. And we're all working on a series of ideas to the point where we can actually physically demonstrate some of these ideas on multiple spectrums at once.
That's the mission.
And so we start small, and we set off a chain reaction, and we demonstrate at a certain level of, like the equivalent of a small town of 10,000 people, or a medium town of, say, 10,000 people. And then we say, okay, that's great. But now we've demonstrated this, we can now go back to the drawing board. Now that we know this works, how will we use it on a larger scale? And then off we go.
So if you don't hear the drums of the marching orders in your head after hearing all that, I don't know what to say. That to me is a very clear mission, an extremely crystal clear, transformative purpose for us to embark upon, to find the others, to connect the solutions, and to ultimately explore and find our way through what works. And so many people in our field are just obsessed with researching the problems and understanding the shortfalls, and understanding the sort of cracks in the electrical grid and the depleted soil science and all that. And it's high time we shift into applying all that energy and research and those hundreds of thousands of hours of podcasts that are happening in the world, and all the discussion groups on collapse and degrowth and all these things, to really shift them into a hard focus on solutions, to seek the answers, to know that, these problems are solvable. There is no silver bullet solution that's just going to make things come back to normal. We have to change. We have to transform, and we are the first ones to do it. And that is an amazing and exciting opportunity. And so, without further ado, I want to sort of shift this into the last sort of section of the metamythic journey that we're on together, which is the call to kindred quest. It's the call to action. It's bringing us into a big we journey. It's understanding the steps of our story, how we got here, why we're here, where we're going, what's the mission, and who do we need to make this story reality? And how do we help bring them into this process as it's their story? Because we can't do all this on our own. We
No.
need to create the invitation that brings people into this system that actually gets us going.
So before we get into that, there's an important point I'd like to sort of bring up. For years, I've been looking at these issues. And yes, you start out looking with the problems and understanding the problems. But then there comes a point, so now I understand the problems, what do we do about it? One of the things that I have noticed that many analysts get caught up in is they have to solve the problems for all 8 billion people all at once with all their complexity, whole cloth. And it has to be simple enough to be understood. And then another week, another armchair warrior then shoots them down because they haven't thought of everything. So what I decided was, instead of trying to actually do something that helps everyone, because most people I come across are actually not interested in these ideas. They don't want to hear that things have to change. They would rather things stayed the same. So, all right, I would rather work with a small group of like-minded people, and we will go out and demonstrate that certain things work on a small scale. If they do work, they can be replicated many times, and if they are shown to be work, the conversation changes. So instead of actually saying we will solve the world's problems in all its complexities, we will now start on a series of small-scale actions that are manageable. And a small number of people who come together and actually work together to actually look at some of these ideas can do that. And then that will set off a chain reaction, and that will change the world. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. So instead of a complex system cannot be made whole cloth. It's got to start from a simple system and grow complex over time. You don't have a massive system either. You start with a very small system and it grows over time.
That's the first call to action, is to find those other people out there
Yeah.
who see the call, who understand it, who are on this quest with us, and to bring them together and to tap into those other movements and groups and communities and explorers out there who have actually found results, and to tap into them and to realize that we're not trying to create a centralized whole cloth transformative system. We're trying to tap into what's working around the world, integrate it into a new system, into a network, into a distributed research system that is as distributed as the energy system that we want to create. And so we're
Yeah.
looking for those people out there who have answers, who feel like they have some serious solution, something that is obvious and can help change the world. We want to find you. We want to bring you in, and we want to bring together teams of people that can basically outline the essential sort of structures and neighborhoods of the problem area that we can then fill in and figure out together in terms of agriculture and energy and minerals and materials and governance, and to really bring together different teams around the world and locally instantiated to develop these components to utterly build this new society. And not everyone has to have it all figured out. You might just have your one thing. Oh, I'm a permaculture expert and I understand this thing. Okay, well, we're going to come together and create communities that have sort of radial belts of different sort of councils and groups and different subcultures within this larger community that can connect with each other across the whole.
Yeah. And so what this means is we are not in competition with each other. It's not a case of, by accepting these ideas that we are proposing, you've somehow got to let go of your existing ideas. Like one idea must destroy another. What we are providing is a collaborative and cooperative approach where these things run in parallel. So this project can happen in parallel with lots of other projects. It doesn't have to be one way is the only way. And that's another trap people tend to fall into. So if you're already operating in a series of projects and you think, well, this is what I'm going to put my hat on, great, that's great. We can collaborate. We can learn from each other. Let's see what happens.
So we're coming up on our time here, and I think this has been a great ride. And it's really a process that's going to continue developing and shaping as we come up to the release of the Purple Transition podcast and other materials that are sort of getting this out there into the world in a more organized form, launching this community, bringing in the people, seeking the volunteers. And hey, if you're watching right now and this really strikes a chord and you're like, I need this in my life, reach out and let's make it. Let's do it. So I just want to sort of kind of high level zoom out and stitch together all the different pieces that we've worked through here. Our call to adventure is ultimately the breakdown of our antiquated and disconnected material, energetic, and economic systems that can no longer support life and that are fundamentally bringing us to a point of evolution where we need to outgrow them. Our purpose is to ask hard questions, is to dig into those questions that people are afraid to ask, and to explore unorthodox ideas, to explore things from perspectives that other people maybe don't see, and to fundamentally question the things that we have taken for granted, like what is the purpose of a human being? What is the purpose of our system? And that brings us into the vision, which is a transformative shift in our civilization, a kind of revolution that's never before been seen on this face of the earth, where we're revolutionizing how, not just who, is in charge and what the structure of society is to create a decentralized system instantiated in the three horizons of a 10,000 person city, implementing all the best practices and energy systems, food systems, governance systems to create the best possible world that we want in this world, working back into research labs and development to bring those technologies up and scale them and interconnect them. And then the mission, which is to create the Purple Transition, which is a roadmap that brings us toward that as a community and a network of people around the world coming together to solve this complex problem and doing the thing, putting our best foot forward. And our call to action is very simple. Join us. Like, let's build this community. Reach out and get involved and contribute your knowledge, your skills, your vision. Help us build the community and the container to catch these ideas. Help us build networks of people around the world that can come together and support them. And ultimately, ask the hard question. Ask the questions in the world. Question the world as it is. It may seem so hard and solid and fixed, like it's supposed to be that way, and it could have been that way for 100 years, but it could have been wrong for 100 years. So ask the stupid question. This has been an amazing sort of journey, and I'm really excited to continue working with you, Simon, on this, to keep polishing up. We actually had some really good insights that we found some sections of the story that really need work, that we need to work out how to really effectively and efficiently communicate this. It's all a part of the process. And by the time we launch the Purple Transition podcast very soon, that's all going to be worked out. So, Simon, any closing thoughts on the sort of reflections from the journey, on your return from this walk that we've made through what is, what can be, and what we got to do now?
So, yes, I am in contact with a lot of people. And in fact, a lot of young people contact me and say, what should I do with myself? Like, what should I do for, education? And I see that there's an enormous amount of anxiety out there, a lot of fear. And there are a lot of things to be worried about. Like, we do have challenges in front of us. But instead of, what I would say is, if we actually sort of accept our past, but face our future with open hearts and open minds, there are things that we can do to meet the challenges that are coming in. If we free ourselves from the existing established way of thinking. So there are ways to go forward. That we don't have to fear the future. I hear so often how many people are calling for humanity to be punished for its sins of its past behavior. Okay, some of it wasn't great, but we should learn and evolve and step past it instead of repeating the same problems while flagellating ourselves over how terrible we are. I believe, Zach, you said the phrase, they worship the volcano.
Yeah, the doomers.
But so at the same time, there's the cornucopians who claim that there's no problem, someone will think of something. That's great. The challenges we've got in front of us are pretty big. I'd rather be the person having the thought. Right. So we've got to face these problems from a point of view of reality. But once we do, and we think with an open mind, there are solutions for some of it. That's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily for everyone. I want the people who are prepared to think outside the box and work together with me and you on these things. And we leave everyone else behind.
Well, they're going to have to catch up eventually. And
Oh, they
this is going
will.
to be an
They
incredible
will.
opportunity that they can get in on the ground floor of if they're wise.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
yeah, I just
until
want to say one last little observation that we are in a story. That's where we started this, that our story is broken. And we have forgotten that stories have arcs and that stories have downturns. That there is a very predictable structure of pretty much every good story we've ever seen where the heroes get themselves into a jam and then they find their way out of that jam. And because they went into that jam, they change and they evolve and they transform. It's essential. It's a part of the story. And so we should learn from it. We should embrace it. We should love the volcano without worshiping it. We should really understand that this is an amazing opportunity for us to change everything. And that if we fixed things and created some silver bullet solution, we'd still be destroying the world and ourselves. And there's just so much opportunity. The vision is great. The vision is endless. It is an endless vision that calls for all of our participation and imagination to rethink the world and rebuild it. Let's fucking do it.
let's do it.
Welcome to Another World is Possible. A little bit about us. A little dive into our metamythic journey of how we got here and why we're here. The problem in the world that we are here to solve, the crack in our reality, the story that is broken in our world is story itself. It's the fact that all our problems essentially stem from the fact that stories made this world, that legal systems, law, money, markets, governments, corporations, these are all abstract entities, metaphysical constructs, abstraction symbols, and dreams that have reshaped through physical reality, through systems that have changed the reality that we live in today. And storytelling itself has gone from this ancient magic technology to project ourselves through the purpose into the vision of where we are going in the world and consciously charting a course for that new world, into marketing, advertising, propaganda, public relations, these reductions of reality that are duping us and keeping us stuck in that story, hollowing us out, putting artificial scarcity in us so that it can sell us products, or keep us duped against this sort of one side versus the other political narratives that are keeping us from our true potential. And so our purpose, which very naturally emerges out of that, is to transform that story and to bring story back to its true place as the conscious technology to author our own future. To come back from idle participants, consumers, and customers to become the authors of reality and to transform that story and to help you find your purpose and chart a course for the vision that you see as possible. And if we do this, if we take this quest that motivates us, that burns in our hearts, and shoot it all the way out into the stratospheric possibilities of what is possible if we do it, we see this vision of another world that's here. Another world that is not just possible, but inevitable. When we create a system for telling stories in a new way that allows us to root ourselves through this metamythic journey into why we're here, what brought us here, where we're going, and what the mission is to get there. We are really constructing an entirely new framework, not just for telling a story and expressing how we are and who we are and what we're here for, but to transform the organizing principles of how we consciously author reality. And that takes the shape in the immediate mile, the mission to distill a huge vision into something, that we'll deal with in other videos. Our mission, our immediate mile, is to create a federated cooperative agency of agencies to bring together the stories and storytellers to create this system, this storytelling engine, to bring together and pool all of our gifts into a shared service pool that creates a full system, a holistic end-to-beginning storytelling system to take you from right here where you are, honoring, all the brokenness in the stories that we're stuck in, to break out of those old narratives, align ourselves into our purpose, blast off into our visions, and then bring ourselves back down to earth in the mission as an evolving framework that brings us ever closer to where we're going, and to craft mythic invocations that invite people into that story as characters. So this is an agency of people that are filmmakers, that are doing branding, that are designers, that are visionaries and change makers, and people who have the solutions. And so we're pulling that all together into a system to service, this brings us into our own invitation, people who have a story to tell, people who are struggling to communicate this world-changing, wonderful, magical idea that you have that is possible.
We're looking for those frustrated change makers who have the answers to society's problems and cannot communicate them. And we're looking for those people whose heart beats and breaks for being stuck in this story. You know that this isn't the way we're supposed to be. You know you're not really connected to your full purpose and potential. And yet you're in the old world, you're in an organization or a company or you're an individual, and you're looking to break out of that story and transform. We're looking for people who want to transform. We're looking for storytellers to join our agency and help us build this magnificent glittering system that I will be unveiling in ensuing videos to truly transform the structure of business into easiness and create an end-to-beginning storytelling system that becomes a story engine for bringing out the magnetic, amazing possibilities in the world, broadcasting them in a media platform that connects people and investors and characters to join those stories so that they can become reality. So right now, our invitation, we're looking for investors who can invest in this beautiful vision. We're looking for people who have a story, who need help telling it. We're looking for storytellers who can join our community of stories that it's growing. And we're looking for people to join us on this journey, to go on a quest with us, to meet us where we're at in this journey at the beginning of something truly wonderful, and to go with us along the way, to like and subscribe and leave comments and all of that, and to support us, to reach out, to get involved, and to come together in a community where we are learning how to regain our true understanding of the magical power of stories to change reality. Thank you for watching. This is the beginning of an amazing journey. I'm so excited to share all that we are building and dreaming with you, and to invite you into that story with us. Come on. We need you to do this. We need your help. We need your participation. We need you to go on a journey with us. We need you to remember that this is not a job, a task, a struggle. This is a quest. And that stories made this world, imagination made this world, and imagination can make it anew. Another world is possible. Is it? Of course it is.